Today we're going to look at section 5.4. These are your notes for 5.4, which is solving proportions. Okay, and for this there are three methods for solving proportions. We're going to take a look at each method. The first method is called mental math. We have already talked about that. And so mental math is when you think through the problem. So I know that 5 times 2 was 10, so I'd multiply 8 times 2, and that would give me 16. So in solving this with mental math, I would know that x equals 16. Sometimes mental math doesn't work out very well because I don't know what 6 times but is 9. So in that case, I would use a different method, and one possibility is multiplication. Now with multiplication, you've actually done this before. If we go back a couple chapters, this is where you would draw your teeter-totter, and then pinky test, look at your variable, what's happening to it. It's being divided by 6, so I would multiply by 6 on both sides. My 6's would cancel out. Sorry, that would be a W. And now we want to look at what we get when we take 6 over 9 and multiply it by 6. So to solve this out, just go ahead and multiply the numbers on top first. So you would take 6 times 6, and that's 36. And if you divide that by 9, you get 4. So W equals 4. Retry the next one and turn the computer back on when you're done. Okay, on this problem, we drew teeter-totter. Here's my variable. It's being divided by 15, so I would multiply by 15 on both sides. So this cancels out, and then we need to work this out. You would go ahead and take 15 and multiply it by your 12, and then you would divide that by the 10. And 15 times 12 is 180, and 180 divided by 10 is 18. So that's how you would work that one out, using mental math and multiplication. Our third way is called the cross products property. And the cross products property states that if you multiply diagonally A times D, it's going to be equal to diagonally B times C. So those cross products are equal. We used that when we were checking for proportionality. Now we're going to use it to solve. So in my first example, I would take W times 10, and that's 10W. And then I would take 8 times 7, which is 56. Now I have an equation that looks a lot like what we did last chapter and the chapter before. And you can just draw your teeter-totter. Pinky test, here's my variable. I need to divide by 10 to get that alone. 10's cancel out, and W is equal to 5.6. That's the cross products method. Go ahead and try these next two and turn it on the computer when you're done. Okay, on this next problem, we're going to do our cross products. And it's good if you find the variable and do that first. So y times 3 is 3y. And then diagonally we would take 9 and multiply it by 17, which is 153. And now I can go ahead, teeter-totter if you want to. We're going to divide by 3. 3's cancel out. And here I have y is equal to 153 divided by 3 is 51. And that's your answer. Now this next one at first looks a little confusing because we have an expression in here. But when we do cross products, we get 2 times d minus 2 equals 2, and 5 times 4 is 20. Now to solve this, we're not going to distribute. We'll just go ahead and do teeter-totter. Notice there's multiplication going on here, and so we're going to divide by 2. And that gives me d minus 2 is equal to 10. Finally, you would look and your d and do opposites, so I would add 2. So d should equal 12. So that's the cross products method. If you notice on each of these, my second step was to divide by something. Okay? And I always wound up dividing by the thing that's diagonal from the variable. And that leads us to a shortcut. Your shortcut, and this is your exciting thing for today, you've learned these three methods. Sometimes it can be mental math, sometimes it can be multiplication, sometimes you want to use cross products, but always you can use the shortcut. And a shortcut means you multiply diagonally, and then you divide. Circle that word divide. And divide by the remaining number. So these three problems are the same three problems we just did up above. So you don't have them written again on your paper, but here I had W over 8 equals 7 over 10. Here I have it again. For cross products, I would multiply these two numbers across. 8 times 7 is 56. And then you divide by the thing that's left. 56 divided by 10 is 5.6. Notice that that's the answer we got when we worked it out. So let's look at the shortcut again here. We take 9 times 17, divide by the number left over. So you can do that on your calculator. 9 times 17, that's our 153 we did earlier, and divide it by your 3, and you get 51. Y equals 51. It even works on these problems. I multiply straight across and divide by what's left. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 divided by 2 is 10. So this time I got, instead of d equaling 10, d minus 2 equals 10. I multiplied 5 times 4 and got 20, divided by 2 and got 10. This one I have to do one more step on, though. I have to add 2. So you know that d equals 12. So that is the shortcut method, and I'd like you to try that now on these 3 problems. And then turn it back on when you're done, and we'll look at them. Okay, on this first one, you should have multiplied 2 times 28, and then you should have divided by your 7. And that should have given you x equals 8. Here, you should have multiplied 5 times 6, which gives you 30. Divide by your 12, and you get y equals 2.5. Here, 40 times 6 is going to give you 240. Divide that by your 15, and you get x plus 1 equals 16. I have to do one extra step here and subtract my 1. So you should have x equals 15. So that is how you work with the shortcut. Let's look at 3 story problems. Go ahead and work through these and then turn it on and check them. Okay, on an average day, the cafeteria serves lunch to 530 students. 2/5 who buy dessert. How many students bought dessert? Since we're doing this in proportions, we're going to write this as a proportion. It says 2/5 bought dessert, which means 2 out of every 5. So how many would that be out of 530? That is how you would write your proportion. To solve that, we can cross multiply 530 times our 2, and then divide by our 5, and that would give you an answer of 212. So you should have found out that 212 students bought dessert. Alright, Sonia's class has 24 girls and 8 boys. Her school has a total enrollment of 860 students. If the school has the same ratio of girls to boys as Sonia's class, how many girls are in the school? Okay, we start out with 24 girls to 8 boys. And we need to write in proportion. The only other thing we know is a total of 860 students. Well, we're trying to find how many girls, so I know my girls goes up here. So if I'm going to put 860 students down here, I need to change something because it doesn't say students on this side. It just says boys. But we can find the total students by adding the girls plus the boys, and 24 plus 8 is 32. So you'd really want your first proportion to be 24 girls for every 32 students. And now we can use cross products to solve this. So 860 multiplied by our 24, divided then by the number that's left, which is 32, tells us that you have 645 girls. Okay, let's look at this last example. It says the graph shows the toll Y due on a turnpike for driving X miles, and your toll is $7.50. So how many kilometers did you drive? So looking at the graph here, there's 2 numbers, and this one has the $7.50. And it says that we went 100 miles. So I know I went 100 miles, but it wants how many kilometers. So I'm trying to change from miles to how many kilometers would that be. So I need to write another proportion that has miles over kilometers. So I look over here at my conversion factors, and I look for one that has miles to kilometers. Looks like this first one does. So I would fill in 1 mile for 1.61 kilometers. And then I can just do my cross products to solve. 100 times 1.61 divided by 1. And that works out to 161 kilometers. So if you drive 100 miles, you've driven 161 kilometers. Okay, so your homework for today is to do a proportional worksheet and then homework quiz 5.1. There are 2 sides to the worksheet, so please make sure that you do both sides of your worksheet.